So it's a large topic, but to distill it down for a second, when we talk about the edge, basically what we are talking about is not work that is performed in the cloud or in a data center, but specifically outside of those two locations. So this could be at some sort of satellite location, at a company regional center or a local center. Typically, what we describe as on premises, meaning in the physical facility. It may even be in a closet, or it could have some sort of mobility. It could be in a vehicle or some other conveyance moving around from place to place. So it doesn't have to have a fixed location. And when we think specifically about AI, what we are really talking about here is some sort of model inferencing that happens um, either in real time at the physical premises or in near real time happening nearby. And the reason why is latency. When we talk about a round trip to the cloud and back in general, we're talking about something that would typically take 90 milliseconds or more for a complete round trip. That can be too long in a lot of situations. So it's critical for that inference time to take place more quickly. And that means locating the inferencing as close as possible to where the action is taking place. In addition, one other consideration here is that the location may actually be disconnected from the internet, or it may have a high degree of latency. So, for that reason as well, you want to make sure that any inferencing takes place as close as possible to the actual location.
And I noticed, Joe, that you really were speaking mainly about inferencing rather than, the training angle of AI, which we've seen a huge amount of money being invested in the last few years. But that piece typically happens in the hyperscale and in the large data centers. And then at the edge, it's the inferencing that kind of dominated our conversation and seems to be the type of AI that's going to be deployed in these more constrained environments.
That's
And
a really good point. Diving into that just a little bit for a
sure.
second. Yes, absolutely. Virtually all training nowadays is expensive and doesn't have resources that most enterprises have access to, let alone smaller businesses and companies. Therefore, most of that training typically takes place in the cloud. There may be narrow situations where you can do it a lot closer, especially for smaller and special purpose models. The exception to that would be the topic of federated learning, which can happen in a distributed environment and can happen at the edge. That is a frontier technology. Some people call that the jagged edge. Um, that is gaining an interest in popularity. There are companies innovating in that space, but it has not reached the masses yet by any means. When we talk literally about the act of deploying, typically companies have a pipeline set up, but most pipelines generally do not connect directly to the endpoints that will be consuming and using the models. And therefore, at least for the last mile, if not for a larger distance, you typically have two types of deployment scenarios. You either have static scripts which need to be manually maintained using an imperative configuration and critically require a direct connection to the endpoints, which requires opening up a security hole, potentially in firewalls, increasing your attack surface. Or the alternative, the best practice, although there are fewer tools to do this, would be through clever use of automation, which means using a declarative configuration, endpoint initiated requests, and no direct access or identity knowledge of the endpoints by a central location. So those are the two typical types of deployment processes that tools would be used for the last mile delivery.